She has a nice stock of wine over there. I guess we could have a drink and we could really talk.
Yeah. Okay, are we rolling? Okay. Hey there, welcome. It's Made in Nacogdoches. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm here today with David Stallings, who is just, wait, are you a Ben?
Yes. 1947, about 8 blocks from here.
So he is a born in Nacogdoches person. I thought it'd be good today I want to find out about you. Obviously, I know you real well, but I want other people to know you.
Okay.
And, we can talk about Nacogdoches because you know a lot of the history of Nacogdoches.
Mm-hmm.
So you were born. What happened?
I don't know.
You don't remember? What's the first memory you have? Where were you born?
Memorial Hospital.
Right here in
August 8th,
Nacogdoches?
1947, yes.
Okay.
And I was going through some papers the other day, and I found the bill from Dr. Taylor, who delivered me, and it was $12. Quite a bargain.
Really? You can't get anything for $12. You can't even get chicken fingers for that anymore.
And he delivered both my sisters. I think he charged more for them.
So for 10 fingers and 10 toes,
That's right.
$12.
Yes, sir.
That's a deal.
Yeah. And went to Fredonia Elementary School the year it opened. In 1953, I think it was. I was 6 years old in the first grade out there. And ironically, many, many years later, my late wife, Jean, who was also born here, taught in the same classroom that I went to the first grade in out there.
The actual classroom?
Yes. Just
Wow.
yeah. But she taught that 35 years, mostly out there. Yeah.
Wonder if your little 6-year-old spirit was running around that room.
Probably so
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went to school.
Mm-hmm. And then, sort of strange, my father kept changing jobs from Lufkin to Nacogdoches. So I was born here, and I think when we were about 2 or 3, we moved to Lufkin. Mm-hmm. And he was partners with a man in a trucking company over there. Then after a few years, we moved back here, and I went to the first grade through the 6th here. And in the 7th grade, we moved back to Lufkin. He went to work for a furniture company over there. The 8th grade, we moved back over here, and he opened a furniture store right down here at 412 Main, where you used to live, upstairs.
Wow.
I was raised in that building. That was my dad's furniture store on the bottom floor there.
Was it called the Wow Building at that time?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Woodman of the World, yeah.
You know, if you're upside down and there it says Mom, I think.
Mom,
yeah. Many nights I would look up and say, Mom.
Yeah, but that was his store. And then played football for Nacogdoches High and boxed in the Golden Gloves and got interested in acting and stage there, and then spent most of my life as a concert and record and television producer for a lot of the older country music artists.
Wow. Now, were you funny as a kid?
Yeah, got in a lot of trouble in school for that. Never got a lick in school. I could always sort of blame it on somebody else.
Because we were just talking about how that used to in school, there was no consent or anything.
No.
They just picked.
No,
just
nothing like it is
you
now.
up and spanked
Oh
you.
yeah, there were several coaches who you feared them because they had big arms and they had these paddles, had smiley faces on the paddle, so it would leave that impression on your behind.
Oh wow, like a little brand.
Yeah, a lot of guys considered that a badge of honor. I didn't want to live.
Well, didn't they? I know that in our school they had little holes drilled in them.
That's what
too,
he did, but it was a smiley
wind
face
resistance.
image. Yes. Yeah, and some of them had holes all the way through them.
Oh, yeah.
And they would give you. I remember in the. I guess it must have been the 8th grade. The teacher was also the Nacogdoches High School baseball coach, and he was known for taking boys out of class down to the baseball park, which was down here at the end of Church Street then, high school baseball park, and let you work down there. And that would be the last period of the day during study hall. And so you wanted to go down there. But the first day we walked into study hall, he said, I need 6 volunteers, and for some reason I did not raise my hand, and they all thought they were going to work down at the field. So he said, come up here, boys, line up around my desk, put your hands on my desk. He took out a paddle and gave each one of them 3 or 4 licks, and my friend Steve Spradley turned around and said, what was that for? He said, just for what you're thinking you might do in my class. Can you imagine that now?
That's called preventative medicine.
Yeah, he would go to Huntsville for that now.
Yeah. I'm like you. I don't think I ever got
one.
a spanking. I got a barely spanking at home, for where they'd threaten you and all that. But
my dad is probably the only man I've ever feared in my life. He's a World War II hero, and he never laid a hand on me, but I saw him get mad a couple of times, and I did not want any part of that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So what do you mean a hero? What
well, he served in the in the Navy, and he was in. I consider everybody from that war a hero because he was in several battles out in the Atlantic. He was. Did you see the movie Greyhound with Tom Hanks? It was about a destroyer escorting troop and fuel ships across the Atlantic back and forth, during the war out of New York. And Dad was in that, so they were shot at many times, and fortunately never hit. But
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So tell me about what was Nacogdoches like back in the 50s and stuff?
Well, nothing like it is now. My earliest memory here was when we moved here. I guess we moved back here, like I said, when I was in the first grade, and we lived on a little street called Lynn Street. It was a dirt street, and Randy Johnson came along much later, but he lived several doors down. But it was a dirt street, and it's right there in front of Fredonia Hill Baptist Church, right where that little taqueria is, that little, and it's right down that street where the barber shop. Anyway, it was a dirt street that just was a dead end down there, about 4 houses down there. And I would walk from Fredonia School home about 3 or 4 blocks, and I would never consider letting my child do that today, if I had one.
Yeah.
And there was a little dairy mart out there. We could walk over there from the elementary school campus.
What was North and South Street? Was it?
It was 2-lane, and it looked like Mound Street and Logansport Street do now, all old houses like that. In fact, my late wife lived in a house right across from the Fine Arts Building, and it's gone now. I think they sold that property to Jack in the Box many years ago. Now it's not not McAllister's, but something like that.
Yeah, I think it's McAllister's.
That's right there by that Sunshine Food Mark. That's where she lived, and her grandmother had been raised in that house. It was so old.
So I'm not dreaming when I say that when I went to college here, the trees touched each other on North Street.
They did, in
big
fact.
old houses.
That's right. There was no University Drive. Well, I think they start right after you left here. I think the early 70s, but no University Drive, no loop, and North Street was 2 lanes. And the population when I graduated from Nacogdoches High in '65 was, I think, 10 or 11,000. It was an idyllic place to grow up. I would.
So was it like Mayberry kind of?
Sort of, yeah. A lot of fun. Milford Barbershop was down in front of where Randy Johnson's furniture stored in that area, and one of my classmates, Sammy Shepard Price, now. Her dad was Sam Shepard. He operated what was called City Cafe that later became Shepard's, where Johnson Appliance is now. But it was shotgun, booths on one side and a little bar, like a little counter there with bar stools. And then Stripling's drugstore was in the next block up here on the other side of where Commercial Bank is now. That's Craig's relative, Craig Stripling's relative.
Oh, how
his Uncle Sam. And they had the greatest soda fountain in the world.
I miss that. Do you know that one of my goals in life was to have a banana split at the drugstore, 75 cents, which was outrageous.
Oh, yes.
But it was so good, and I did it one time.
I would go down there after football practice, and the lady would make the grilled chicken salad sandwiches and grilled cheese, and they served the best malts, and they did them in the old blender thing with the metal cup. And,
where you going?
Yeah, and there was so much in there, they poured it in a tall and a short glass, and I never will remember going in there one day, and I said, I want 2 malts. She said, well, you're going to get 2 glasses. I said, well, I need 4. So I was a big boy back then.
You were a boxer and football player.
All of that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what was the temperament of Nacogdoches at that time? Was it, like here, it seems really fast paced now.
Oh, it was
What's
more like
the
it was more like Mayberry back then, So you knew everybody, and you go in a restaurant and I would literally know everyone in there, in the barber shop. Well, Milford's was still the same way when they closed up there, but it was sort of a social event when you went to get a haircut.
I went in Milford's, when I first got here and stuff, and it was in some way, like I'm from small town, so I remember that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it was slightly intimidating.
Yeah.
I went in there and everybody kind of went, oh yeah, that's something. And then you're like, what'd I do? And they had a gun being raffled off.
Oh, you're right.
And I was like, just came from L.A. and I was like, hold on here for a minute. But it was a really interesting place.
Oh, yeah, it was. A lot of fun to go in there.
And people would tease you.
Yeah. I went in there. I had not been in there in years, and maybe about 8 years ago when I started the little newspaper, they started advertising with me. So I went in, and Gene Milford was still living there, and he was quite a character. And he was known for just, no matter how you told him you wanted your hair cut, you looked just like you got out of the military. So I sat down and I said, Gene, I've already been in the Navy. I like my hair just trimmed some, and I looked just like I'd gotten out of Navy boot camp when I walked out of there.
I know.
So I got home and I put on Facebook that he had cut one of my ears off, and he had it in a jar of alcohol down there. And he called me, man, why'd you tell? They've been coming down here looking. You know?
I probably saw that here. It's called a mildew.
Yeah.
That's what everybody calls about it.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell me about, because I know you have a history of like practical jokes on the radio and
sure,
records and stuff.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Tell me about some of those.
I guess
How you got into it.
the only talent I think God gave me was the ability to mimic different voices. I mean, I can listen to almost anyone, and after a few minutes, pretty much nail their voice. And when I was a child, my grandfather had a sawmill out between Melrose and Sherino, back in the woods, a little community called Little's Chapel. And I would go out there and in the summers and spend a couple of weeks every time. And there were all kinds of children, from what I would call hillbillies like me to little black kids out there. And so I learned to mimic their accents or their dialects, whatever. And I started calling people just for the fun of it when I was just a little kid. And the first one, you've probably heard me tell this one on stage, the first one I really did, there was an old lady who lived next door to my grandparents down there. And she had a screw loose. I mean, she was nuts, but she hated kids. And you might walk by her house, she might throw a rock or something at you. She's just crazy, you know. And so one day she had screamed at us or something, and I told my little cousin, I said, if you can go in there and get in her house and act like you want to visit with her son for a while, I'm about to pay her back for everything she's ever done to us. So he managed to get in. And I called over there, and I told her my voice. Must have been about 12 because my voice had changed. I sounded like an adult. I said, I'm with Southwestern Bell Telephone Company, and we're doing a survey in your neighborhood. Could you please tell me how much telephone cord you have coming out of the wall? And she said, well, looks like about 6 feet. I said, well, that's what I thought. I said, everybody out there is supposed to have 9 feet, and your neighbor has 12, and I think she's pulled 3 feet of her cord over into her house, of your cord over into her house. Well, she blew a fuse. Well, why did that happen, and what are you going to do about it? I said, well, it's not our fault. I said, I can send a truck out there, and a serviceman, it's going to cost you quite a bit of money, or I can help you, and we'll do it right now. She said, well, I'm not paying. And I said, well, have you got a chair handy? And she said, I surely do. And I said, if you don't, and she was a large lady. And I said, if you don't mind, would you drag that over to the wall right where that cord's coming out? And this was in the days when, you remember, usually a black steel or iron telephone with one black cord running to a little box on the wall with a screw in it. We didn't take it all over the house. It was not portable, no cell phones, no wireless phones. And I said, now wrap that cord around your strongest wrist and put your feet against the wall, and you and I are going to count to 3, and on 3 you pull as hard as you can, and you'll get that cord back in your house. Well, I don't know what I was thinking, but I got her to do it. I said, okay, you ready? She said, yeah. I said, 1, 2, and I could actually hear grunting and groaning and carrying on, and on 3 the line went dead. Well, my cousin, she was, like I said, a large woman, and she fell over backward in the living room floor there, and just went crazy, you know. And so she intimidated my little cousin, and he told on me. So I spent the rest of the summer mowing grass to pay for the real phone company to come out there and fix her.
Oh my gosh,
fix her phone.
That's funny.
But then
so that's a real story.
That is not. I'm not lying this time. That's true. Yes. But anyway, So I continued that all through school. Just never anything dirty or nasty. That's probably the meanest one I ever did. I still don't regret it because she was so bad. But anyway, and then it developed into I was producing a lot of concerts for Ray Price and Mel Tillis and Oak Ridge Boys, people like that back in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s. And one of my wife's friends called, and she said she knew I could do these different voices. She said, do you think you could get David to call? We've got a new nurse at Memorial Hospital, very gullible, and we'd like for him to call and pull one of his pranks and record it because we'd like to hear it. So I did. I didn't really think it was that funny, but I took it up there, and one of those doctors said, you're already in the record business. You should put that out. And I said, oh, nobody would want that. And so I thought about it for a few months and a few weeks. And so one day I was sort of caught up on work, and I thought, we're spending tens of thousands of dollars on some of these recording sessions, and most of the time we don't recoup our costs, but this won't cost anything. So I went and got a better recorder. I'd recorded that on a Radio Shack cassette tape, and ordered a better recorder that I could hook directly into the phone, and I made a list of 10 or 15 people here in Nacogdoches that I knew I probably could deceive, and I called them all, just made up the most ridiculous scenarios I could think of. And then I called them all back, told them it was me, and they couldn't believe it. And I wrote them a check and got them to sign a release so it would all be legal. And I had just maybe 400 or 500 copies of the thing made, and I mailed it just sort of a shotgun mailing to radio stations. And I knew probably a third of the radio station people. So nothing happened for probably 6 weeks. And I got into the office one morning, back when you had an answering machine, it was blinking. And I picked it up and said, David, this is Bill Mack at WBAP in Fort Worth. He said, I don't know who that guy is doing those prank calls, but he said, you've got a hit record. He said, I played that last night on my show at about 2 or 3 in the morning. And he said, every truck driver and night shift worker in America wants to buy a copy of it. So 2 days later, I was at the office and the phone rang. David, this is your friend Harold Hensley at WSM in Nashville. Harold was an announcer on the Grand Ole Opry and did afternoon drive on WSM there in town. He said, I played a cut off that comedy album you sent me. I've never had as many phone calls on any record, including Garth Brooks or Elvis or anybody I've ever played. He said, you have got a smash. But long story short, went on to record about 14 of those albums, and we sold 1,250,000 albums. And
wow.
I almost made enough money to get my checking account up to zero. Did real well with it.
Wow.
But toured doing comedy for about 20 years, yeah.
Well, I remember, I didn't know you, but but I heard that one was funny. You were trying to mail a leg to somebody.
Goat. Oh, yeah, that wooden leg. Yeah, that was a post office postmaster somewhere in Louisiana, a little town, yeah.
Can you tell them about that? That was the funniest thing I'd ever
so
heard.
long ago.
I got so tickled.
I think I told him I needed to mail it to my brother or something that had his leg cut off in a wreck or something. I said, can I just put some stamps on it to bring it down there, And he said, well, no, maybe you should wrap it up. And he said, how long is it? And whatever the length was, I said, well, how long can it be? And he gave me and I said, well, it's 2 inches longer than that. I said, I can cut about 3 inches off. He'll walk with a limp, but at least I can mail it. It was funny.
And it was a local mail person.
It was in Louisiana.
Okay.
See, the calls were all real, but they were all set up by someone. And after I did that first album and they started playing them on the radio, people would call my office asking me to prank a relative or a friend. And I would learn what would push their button from this person. And then I would call, and then I'd call back and I'd say, well, your friend Brad Maul put me up to this. And they'd say, oh, he's no good. And then they would laugh, and I'd have to have them sign a release and give them a check, Wow. But yeah.
Well, I remember there was one where you called, you said you had bought some greens, and that you bought a sack full of greens, and when you cooked them, they went down to like just a little handful.
Yeah, that was Mr. Millard.
Mr. Millard, George Millard.
Yeah, he's passed away now, but yeah.
Oh, it was funny. He was not happy about that.
I was speaking in a Middle Eastern or Indian accent, when I did that to him. Yeah.
And you wanted your money back.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just said it was not a good value at all, because they shrunk down so small. He said, apparently you don't know anything about turnip greens.
Oh, that was funny.
It was all harmless stuff. I never did anything dirty or nasty or, that sort of thing. Had a good time with it.
Isn't it weird that you don't know where fame comes from?
Yeah.
Like you didn't do that thinking.
I would have never thought in a million years that, just something that I enjoyed doing as a kid would turn into what it did.
That's crazy. Did you ever have a party line?
Oh, listen, my grandmother, my grandfather who had the sawmill, his wife, my mother's mother, had a party line, and there were about 5 or 6 people on it, and she spent half her life listening to her relatives and other people's conversations.
Explain that in case there's some millennial listening.
There would be 4 or 5 people generally within a mile or so of each other who would be on the same telephone line, and the way you could distinguish your call was you might have 2 rings or 3 rings or 4 rings or 5 rings, and the other people, in theory, were not supposed to pick it up and listen, but they all did. So yeah.
I used to listen in when I was little, and they would tell me to get off the phone.
Oh yeah,
I was like, I'm not here, and they were like, what?
Yeah,
it ain't me.
Yeah, the party lines were Sure, they were very common back then.
Wow.
I think our first phone number here, I can remember as a kid, had maybe 4 numbers total. No prefix, no area code.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that band BR 549 or something like
I got
that.
that from Junior Samples. Hee Haw. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did you cross the threshold from? Because it's not easy to be a performer or an actor in a small town.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a football player. So, how'd you make that switch into show business and being carny folk?
Well, I pledged a fraternity at SFA the first year, which was a big mistake. I Pi Kappa Alpha'd myself into the Navy. But
What do you mean? What do you mean?
You know what I mean. But I had too good a time. I was trying to work at NIBCO at night and go to class in the daytime and then party at night.
So you had a good grade point average.
Oh yeah,
good,
yes,
well below.
Yes, it was well below the average. But anyway, I had promoted some concerts as a high school kid here in town with some older bands that would come through.
What do you mean? You hired them?
Yeah. I met Ernest Tubb when I was 16 years old. He played a place in Goat Hill, Texas, which is between Corrigan and Groveton in the middle of the woods over there. And there was a honky-tonk, and we couldn't get in. We were too young, of course, but we had these fake IDs. It's Steve Spradley, Tommy Daniels, and I, little high school friends. And so we presented our fake IDs, and I never will forget there was a big, fat cowboy at the door with a belt buckle about the size of a
cheese platter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he said, "You got to be kidding me!" So he threw us out. And my friend Tommy had gone to see Ernest Tubb dozens of times. His dad was a big fan, and so Ernest used to play 250, 300 dates a year, and he'd play everything from high school gymnasiums to Carnegie Hall, just wherever. So he had an uncanny knack of remembering names. And, of course, later, his first hit was Walking the Floor Over You in 1940 or 41, and then Waltz Across Texas, Thanks a Lot. And he had a TV show back in the 60s. But anyway, Tom's daddy had taken him so many times to see him that Ernest knew who he was, And so we were sitting on the fender of my 54 Chevrolet trying to watch the show through the fan that was turning on the wall out there, and you could kind of hear it. So he came out to take his intermission, and we were sitting on the fender, and Tommy said, "How are you tonight, Mr. Tubb?" And Ernest kind of stopped me. He said, "Well, I'm fine, Tom. Is that you? Why couldn't you get in?" He said, "No, sir, this is a honky-tonk, they were a little shy." He said, "Well, I'm so sorry." So he invited us on the bus. He could have just, sloughed us off, but he invited us on the bus. And I said, "Mr. Tubb, I started going to the Louisiana Hayride when I was a little boy, and I saw Jim Reeves and Johnny Horton and Johnny Cash and all these people. And I've always been intrigued and interested in the music business, but I can't sing or play an instrument. I never will be able to, but I'd like to be a part of it some way." He said, "Well, here's my card, son. Here's my booking agent's number." He said, "Call," and he said, "I'll help you and tell you all I can, and you call him if you ever want to book me or any of the other people." So about 6 months later, I had been saving up for a newer car than a 54, and I had $600. So I thought, I think I might make some money with him. So I called their office up there, and I was trying to, I didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, "What's the procedure to bring Ernest Tubb to Nacogdoches, Texas?"
Wow.
And he said, "Well, the fee," and this is 1963 money, he said, "it was $1,200, and you could almost buy a new car for that then." And he said, "You send us, when we send you the contract, you send back a deposit of 50%, and then you pay the rest in cash before he steps on stage that night." So I said, "Well, let me call you back." So I went in the old brick gym right there behind the old high school, about 2 or 3 blocks from here. They were renovating it, and the floor was fouled up, so they would let you put chairs on the floor, which normally they would not do. And so I went and scrounged up. I asked some churches and different people if I could borrow some chairs. And then Mr. Fain, who was the editor of the Daily Sentinel, and my dad advertised his furniture store with him all the time, so he was a friend. And I went and asked if he would. I didn't have any money to promote it with, and I said, "Would you run a story about Ernest Tubb, Grand Ole Opry star, coming to Nacogdoches?" He said, "Oh yeah." And my uncle J.C., KJCS Radio, was J.C. Stallings. That was my dad's brother. He started that, and before that it was Key, K-E-E, and before that it was KOSF. So he went way back. He was a Marine during the Pacific World War II, my dad's younger brother. But anyway, I went up to see Uncle J.C., and he helped promote him. And I had some flyers printed and put them all over town. And that night, we had about 600 people show up at, I think, $4 or $5, And so I never will forget, I had the 6 $100 bills in an envelope, and I saw that big bus pull up right there by the gym, and I got out and ran over there and beat on the door almost before it stopped. And the bus driver opened the door the way they used to have it open. He said, "What do you need, boy?" And I said, "Well, I've got the rest of Mr. Tubbs' money." And he said, "Well, you need to send your daddy or the promoter or whoever's running this show." And I said, "No, it's me." And so Ernest was sitting up there in a little booth, and he said, "I've seen you somewhere before, boy." And I said, "Yes, sir, about 6 months ago at Carlton's." He said, "Oh, yeah." So he invited me on the bus, and we became lifelong friends. And he introduced me to Ray Price and Mel Tillis and Farron Young and all those other people.
But wait, you took all the money you had in the world and just threw
Roll
it down on the table as a bet.
Roll the dice.
Because you could have lost all that money.
Or if I hadn't had enough money to pay him, they would have just kept going, you know.
Was Nacogdoches excited about 600 people? That's,
Oh, yeah. That was, what's that, 6 or 7% of the population, you know.
or more. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, who is it that you told me that had an alter ego that he would ride in a car?
Oh, that was Ferlin Husky. He had his big hit was "On the Wings of a Dove," and then "Since You've Gone," which went #1 pop. It was rock and roll and country reggae. You know, remember that song? "Since you've gone, the moon, the stars." But he and I became really good friends in his later years. I didn't know him for a long time, but he was quite a character. He really did have a split personality.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah. Yeah, Ray Price told me that in the early days of the Grand Ole Opry, when in the late 40s and 50s, they would do these little package shows where 4 or 5 entertainers would go out, and they mostly travel in cars, pull in a little trailer with their equipment on it. Didn't have the tour buses back then. And he said they would Ferlin would be sitting in the back, and his alter ego was a character. He talked like this and called himself Simon Crumb, just weird,
So was he joking around, or was it real, or
he
what?
thought it was, I know he thought it was real, but he would start arguing with himself in the 2 different voices. And Ray said one day we were going up into Ohio or somewhere, and Ferlin said, "I can't stand him anymore. Stop the car and throw him out." "Well, you can't throw me out." Ferlin was like, "I'm going to," So he said, like an idiot, I stopped. Ferlin opens the door and acts like he's kicking somebody out, and as the car's pulling off, I hear the voice, "Come back and get me, come back and get me." He said, I thought I was losing my mind. And he said, we got about 10 miles up the road, and Ferlin started crying. He said, "Oh, he's a pretty good old boy. Go back and get him." He said, like an idiot, I turn around and go back to that spot.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And then he would really get weird when he was drinking on stage, which he did quite often. He would go into 3 or 4. He would start reciting the radio characters Lum and Abner, which go way back. That's 2 characters from probably the
Radio
30s or 40s. Yeah, but he's quite a character. But I'll tell you something about him. He was a Shriner. And when Patsy Cline was killed in that airplane crash, it was 62 or 63, her pilot was a man named Randy Hughes, who was also her manager. And they had gone to, I think it was Kansas City, to do a benefit for either a policeman or a DJ or someone over there, and several Grand Ole Opry members went. And after that plane crash, Randy Hughes had no life insurance, and he had a wife and 2 little kids, and Ferlin signed over the royalties to "Since You've Gone," and that put those kids through school and saved their home and everything else.
That's probably still making money, I imagine.
Yeah. And I'll back up a minute and tell you a story about the Patsy Cline plane crash. For 7 or 8 years during the 70s to about the mid-'80s, I produced records and live appearance dates for Bob Wills' Texas Playboys. And there were 5 of them in the band at that time that went all the way back to the 1930s. Bob died in 75. And his widow allowed us to continue on with a band called Bob Wills' Original Texas Playboys under the direction of Leon McAuliffe. Leon is the person who wrote Steel Guitar Rag, which is a classic steel guitar song. Anyway, Leon was a pilot during World War II. And he said they were doing a little tour through, I don't know where they were, but Patsy and Randy were traveling in a car. And they had about a 500-mile trip to the next date, and really exhausted. And Leon said, he said, "Why don't you fly with me?" He had a twin-engine, really nice airplane. And his band would go in the bus, but he'd just fly to the next day. And he said, "Why don't you ride with me?" He said, we just basically took off and flew about an hour and started the descent, and said she turned around and she said, "This is the only way to go, Randy. When we get back to Nashville, I want you to buy an airplane for us and take lessons." Well, which he did, and he had no experience really. And that day they were killed right outside of Camden, Tennessee. They were almost out of fuel. They landed there, and the weather was turning bad. And the little airport operator said, "Why don't you take my car?" It was just 60 miles on to Nashville. And he said, "I'll bring the plane over there tomorrow and drive my car back." "Oh, we can make it." So he takes off, and 2 minutes later they crash inside of a mountain and kill
So
them
they
all.
ran out of gas, basically?
No, just he was not instrument flight ready. He couldn't see and just ran into the side of a mountain and killed her, a guy named Cowboy Copas, and a guy named Hawkshaw Hawkins, who all three of them were members of the Grand Ole Opry, and of course killed Randy too, the pilot. So, but Leon always he was always sad about that, because if she had not ridden with me in that plane that day, she might not have gotten the plane and gotten killed. But that's
Woulda, shoulda, coulda kind of thing.
yeah.
My dad told me one time, he was talking about seeing the Bob Wills and his band when he was in the Navy out in
California.
It was like San Francisco, but not really San Francisco, but it was right in that area. And he said, the way you are about the Beatles, that's the way people were about them.
He was the biggest thing going.
No, he said girls would swoon and people would scream. And,
oh, yeah.
And I don't remember who the big singer was at that time.
Tommy Duncan was his vocalist.
Duncan, but he said it was like Frank Sinatra to other people.
Listen, Bob was an innovator, as you know. He started off as just a fiddle, playing dances out there in your part of the country, up around Turkey and children up in there. Ranch dances.
Yeah.
And he said the first one he ever played, he would stand in the door between two rooms. They'd shove all the furniture back, and his dad got drunk and didn't show up. And he said, "I just knew one song." And he said, "I played it for 3 hours."
Wow.
He said, but the ranchers were so drunk they didn't know the difference. But anyway, then he developed. But anyway, he wound up with a 22-piece band with horns, and you can listen to him. You can just listen to him on anything, Amazon. And there are a lot of videos of him on YouTube that you can watch. And he was a charismatic performer and was not a singer at all. He always hired a singer. Oh yeah, and he would carry on with all that. He would say the funniest things. There were one recording session, and Tommy Duncan was singing this real sad ballad, which they normally didn't do. And so Bob walks up to the microphone and he said, "That bring tears to a wild hog's eyes." Well, Tommy Duncan starts laughing, and he didn't take anything seriously, Or "Shoot low, Sheriff." He's riding a Shetland. He'd say that sometime.
I remember him talking to somebody and saying, "Oh, man, I heard you lost your wife last week." And he goes, "Yes, I did." And he said, "That must have been hard on you." And he said, "It was damn near impossible."
They just
in the middle of a song.
The first recording session they did with a major label was in Chicago in 1936, I think, and it was Brunswick, which later became Columbia Records. And they were all these country boys from the Fort Worth area all drove, got up there. And the engineer was a guy named Art Satherley. He's in the Country Music Hall of Fame. He was from England, very proper gentleman. And Bob started all that yelling, and he said he stopped the session. He said, "Mr. Wills, I love your band, and the music is just amazing, but you mustn't speak when Mr. Duncan's singing." He says, "That's the way we do it at our live shows, and that's the way it's going to be, or we're going home." And so the guys in the band thought, "Oh, we've lost our big chance," but he relented. And, of course, that was his trademark, I've got one record where one of his brothers is singing. It's a live album. And his brother was a great singer. Bob walks up to the microphone and he said, "Don't leave, lady. He'll be through in a minute." He was hilarious.
Wow. Well, but he put jazz in country music.
He mixed country. He didn't like being called a country or hillbilly artist, but he was Western swing. He really sort of invented that genre, But Asleep at the Wheel is a spinoff of that's what they do. But he was amazing.
See, I grew up in West Texas, and there was
Sweetwater.
Hall Nicks.
Hall Nicks in the West Texas.
Playboys.
His son Jody's still doing it.
Well, that's what I was going to tell you about. When I was little, my dad rodeoed. So we would go to the rodeo in Snyder, Texas, and then outside, and it was an outdoor arena, obviously. But down a little ways, it was like a pavilion kind of thing, like a cement floor with cedar posts, chicken wire all around it. And I remember, obviously, I couldn't get in, but I would sneak off from my family, go down there, and I was little, like 8 years old maybe, and I would crawl up on that chicken wire
Watch it.
and watch. And the one I was most interested in was this little kid drumming back there,
See him.
and that was Jody
Yes, sir.
Nix.
Yes, sir.
And I've never met him.
Yeah.
I've never got to tell him, but I always want to tell him I was a fan from the time I was 5 or 6, 8 years old. You know,
they still have that Stampede dance hall in Big Spring.
Yeah.
It's been there for, I guess, 75 years.
And I've never been there, but I've driven past it because Big Springs wasn't far. But
Right. Yeah.
it's amazing the influence they have on you.
Listen, it's I can remember, like I said, going to the Louisiana Hayride when I was 6, 7 years old and seeing all these people. And, you know, I never thought that one day I'd get to work with some of them, you know, Farron Young and all those people that I saw as a child, you know.
Did you ever just sit on your bed throwing dollar bills up going, look at me, that's what I did?
One night after one of my comedy shows, my son Todd, who you know Todd, he's very shy and quiet kind of a person. And we had a great night selling records and all this stuff, you know, CDs back then. And I had a lot of money. I thought I would he's so reserved. So I threw all this money on the bed and I said, son, one of these days this could all be yours. I'm not going to get up in front of people to do that. He was selling records for me that night.
Oh,
you know?
wow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So did you ever have any adventures, you know, because here you are, a 16-year-old kid and maybe 20 by the time, but, you know, these famous people are saying, come on the bus. And did you ride with them from gig to gig or did you?
Just short distances because I like to take my own vehicle, you know.
They didn't corrupt you or anything?
No, they tried to, but
oh,
they
okay,
didn't. Yeah,
okay. I was looking for the dirt.
Oh
there.
no! It was really more of a business, but I became friends with all of them. But I didn't want to ride the bus.
Well, they were pretty good guys too.
Most of them, yeah, they were. You know, as you know, in the entertainment business, it's just like the public in general. They're mostly nice people, and there are a few that you don't ever want to see. You know.
Yeah, it's 90-10 usually. Yeah, it's like hamburger.
And I have met some of my musical heroes who, after I met them, didn't want to ever listen to their records or see them again.
Isn't that weird? Because you have a preconceived notion of what a person's going to be like, and you meet them and you're like, wow, really, why do you exist?
Yeah.
You know?
And the one thing that I admired about people like Ray Price and Ernest Tubb, the old school guys, and Mel Tillis, even after their health deteriorated, they would sit out there and sign autographs until the last person was gone. I mean, they knew who brought them to the dance, you know.
Yeah.
Without them, they'd be sitting home.
So has the industry, obviously it's changed, but what's it changed from?
Well, number one, I still work with some of the older artists like Gene Watson and John Connolly, you know, from the Grand Ole Opry, and Sleep at the Wheel, and people who are reasonably priced and easy to get along with. And now the young artists, if they've had one record, they're asking something like $150,000 to play, you know, and that's way out of.
Yeah.
The most Ray Price was usually, of course, he died 13 years ago, but back then he was $25,000, $30,000, and I'd risk that, but you know, 150, 200 grand, no.
Well, that's what's weird to me is that I don't know when the money values changed, but I mean, like when I went to college here, we had John Denver, Olivia Newton-John.
I remember all them, the Righteous Brothers,
all these people, and.
Love and Spoonful. I remember seeing them up there.
And Helen Reddy, you know, and I don't think they were getting paid $100,000. I think they were getting paid $7,000 or $8,000, maybe.
Probably. Yeah.
And I saw ZZ Top on the back of an 18-wheeler, you know, just a truck bed here, and it's just amazing. And then all of a sudden, I know somebody told me, like, well, I won't mention the person's name, but just one hit person, kind of. And was getting $250,000 in Vegas and stuff.
Even an 8,000 seat Coliseum, you can't pay them that, you know. Especially the ticket prices in East Texas compared to elsewhere, you know. People are. For years, I charged $35 just general admission to see Ray Price, you know. And I booked him in Austin probably 25 years ago at the Paramount Theater right down there. I think it's on Congress. And so I called the theater manager, and we were trying to set the price for the tickets, and I said, what do you think I ought to do on the tickets? I don't want to be too high. And he said, well, I'd start off at $125 for the first 6 or 7 rows. And I had never gotten that for anybody. And I said, are you kidding me? He said, oh, yeah, they'll be the first to sell. I said, oh, I'm almost afraid to do that. So we scaled it from 125 down to 35 or 40 in the balcony. All the balcony seats sold last. The high-end tickets, you know, if they're a fan, they didn't seem to care. But, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. So so you were a boxer. Were you a football player, then a boxer then a football player?
I started boxing in the front yard with neighborhood kids when I was about 10. And then I got into, competition when I was about 15 and fought in the Golden Gloves in Tyler and all of that, so around the country. So,
okay.
But I played football at the same time.
So now I've heard this before because I have a friend that's a kickboxer, and he's like, Brad, you feel pain. I don't feel pain, really. Did you? Were you that
Not
kind
really.
of thing?
Yeah.
Because
there's just an adrenaline rush to it. It's my late wife was my high school sweetheart. We were married 51 years. She passed away in 2020, and you knew Jeannie.
Yeah.
But she would never come to any of my fights.
Oh, really?
And I had 35 sanctioned Golden Gloves fights, and I lost two. And my parents came to one of the two that I lost. And I had won the heavyweight championship of East Texas in 65. And the next year I lost to a guy, outpointed me up there. He didn't hurt me or anything. I mean, he just hit me more than I hit him. But my parents, they didn't want to see that,
Yeah. Wow. I don't understand that. I mean, what was it like? Did you like doing that?
Yeah. It was just a sport. It was not trying to hurt anybody. It was just...
Yes, you were.
But I mean, it was a skill,
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun,
Wow. But then, and you were 16 when you started spending all your money on show business and making money and stuff.
But kept boxing at the same time. And then I boxed in the Navy too.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why I have no brain cells left.
Yeah, we'll see about that. So is there a difference between your public persona and your private? Like a lot of comedians that I've met in my life in show business were
not nice at all.
Funny people, but most depressed, angry, bitter people I've ever met.
I was
in my
never
life.
like all the theaters I played. I mean, I would before the show sit down with the crew and the manager and sit in the audience. We'd visit for 2 or 3 hours before the show, and there was not a place I couldn't go back to. Never had any trouble whatsoever, and loved the people and the fans and all of that. So yeah. And it was gratifying because my comedy was clean. I could be up there looking out at the audience, and I would see a 6-year-old kid laughing along with the parents and grandparents sitting out there.
Yeah.
It was a ball. I loved it. Absolutely.
So how did you balance? Because I know you loved Gene, and you had Todd and Drew. So how'd you manage family and show business? Because a lot of people can't do that.
Well, a lot of,
being married once is a very weird thing.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah.
In show business.
Yes. She was so into school, and she was a wonderful mother to my boys. And with the time we did have together, I mean, I was not gone 200 days a year. Most of the events were, Thursday or Friday or Saturday nights, and sometimes it'd just be 1 or 2 in a week. And I was home during the week most of the time, So it was fine. Yeah, no, not a problem. I think she was glad to be rid of me, So.
Okay. So you were just coming in and out, sort of, and all that.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a regular job?
Well, I worked for about 6 months down at NIBCO going to SFA when I figured out I couldn't stay awake 24 hours. I was working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and then trying to go to class after
and
that.
What are you doing down there?
They make brass valves, everything from oil-filled valves as big as this table to the faucets on the side of your house.
And what were you doing?
I was a molder, which was making these sand molds that they poured the brass, liquid hot brass into that made the faucets or whatever we happened to be doing. It was hard work.
And hot work, I guess.
Yeah. No, didn't wear a mask or anything. I'm surprised I still have lungs,
Wow. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we'd put, in essence, DDT or Agent Orange in planter boxes to put on the crops and stuff to keep the weeds out. And I remember my dad would say, now when you'd get it with your bare hands or your gloves.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd say, now when you put it in there in the planter, when you put it in there, turn your head away. I'm like, okay, and that's pretty amazing, the stuff we used to do. That
I'm drawing a blank. What is the material that they used to use in building so much?
Asbestos?
Yes. I remember when that house on Lynn Street, I actually remember how much it cost, $7,000 for a 3-bedroom house, 1953,
Wow.
It's still there as a rent house. But when they finished building it, there was a pile of asbestos siding in the backyard, and I played with that. And
It
all
was
the
like
kids,
snow,
yeah,
probably.
we build little houses with it, and then the old ship I was on, the Navy, was insulated with asbestos.
Wow. That's probably why you were a boxer.
I-
Made you tough, I guess.
I guess so. I don't know.
Wow. So, what do you think about religion?
Well, I was, as we say in the Baptist church, saved when I was 16 years old and was baptized at Calvary Baptist Church right out here on East Main Street.
Now, was it an emotional moment for you?
Yeah, it surely
You know,
was. It surely was.
Was
yeah.
it when they do just as
It was
I
one of those. It
am?
was one of those where you're just tugging. The devil had you by one hand, as Jerry Lee said, and the God by the other. And I was just floated down that aisle, and yeah.
Wow.
And my son.
That takes a lot of courage, actually.
when
I
you're a
remember
kid,
I
you
was
know.
13,
Right.
and people were just like, "What's happening?" Because where you said floated, that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
I felt lifted.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of, and it was embarrassing and
Oh, yeah.
good and
Oh, yeah.
bad.
I
and-
know, it's scary. Yeah. The night, my youngest son Drew was always really big, and he played college football. And when he graduated from Nacogdoches High, he was like 6'4", 320 pounds. And the night he was baptized, he was about 12 or 14, and he was chunky then. And so Dr. Alan Reed at First Baptist Church is where I've attended church. I started there when Jean and I got married because she'd been a member there as a child, and so I moved over there. Anyway, the night he baptized Drew, I said, and Alan was a big guy too, and I got him laughing back there. I said, "You probably need to drain some of this water out with Drew. Both of y'all in there. You're going to drown these people in the choir." And he starts laughing. And he said, "I know they can hear me out there."
That's funny.
Yeah.
You know, there was a Baptist church in a little community close to our place, 5 miles from our house, and we would go over there because the door was always open.
Yeah.
And it was only filled up on Wednesdays and Sundays.
Yeah.
So
Just play in
me
there.
and my best friend, we'd go up there, and I was drawn toward it. You know, it had that Jordan River coming
Sure.
down.
Oh, yeah, I
painted on
remember
the
those
back of the wall.
paintings. Yeah, they were eerie. You know?
And it was above the altar. It
Yes.
was like a
Or
story
probably
up.
behind the baptistry back there.
Yeah, yeah. And I would climb up there, and I've often thought, I'm like, that's where you got that bug for being on stage and
Oh, yeah.
acting, because we
Yep.
were, out there preaching and talking and doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember.
And there wasn't any water in it at that moment. I guess they drained it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah, I've always been a Baptist, but of course I have backslid. I had a few drinks here and there, but never to excess. But
tell me about Baptist and beer.
well, when I
Or going
when I
fishing.
was a kid, they were much more strict than they are now. They did not believe in dancing or drinking at all, and of course I did both. And didn't care what they thought, you know. So, well, they can kick me out and I'll become a Catholic. It'll be okay then, But anyway, but you always felt weird if they had a place called the Nacogdoches Youth Center, where the Nacogdoches Treatment Center is on Park Street, and it was a place where every Friday and Saturday night it was open. It was supervised. They had a jukebox, and sometimes little bands would come in there and play. They had a room with a ping pong and a pool table and a TV you could watch, and it was totally innocent. They had, like I said, chaperone. And I said I didn't care, but I would find myself looking over my shoulder if I was out there dancing with Jean, and she was a Baptist too, to see if, somebody was going to go tell on me.
Yeah.
That's just not right,
Wow. We had the Catholitorium, which was a auditorium at the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And I remember my family was very diverse for some reason, but one of my sisters was Church of Christ. And she was so scared. She said, "Brad, you're going to become a Catholic. Please don't become a Catholic." She was, and I was like, there's nobody at the Catholitorium on Friday nights making me do anything that I didn't want to do.
That's right.
I came there to dance and to hang out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so funny what the outside of the world thought
Yes.
about it.
And-
I was ashamed. I wouldn't let my mother pull up and drop me off. I was in junior high when I started going.
Come in the back door outside.
Yeah, I'd make her drop me off a block or two away, and then I'd slink in there, And it's so funny because I know this not about me, but
That's
it
okay.
is about me.
I want to hear about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, we live 20 miles from that town. And so for me, I read the newspaper, but it was mostly to catch up on who was the king and the queen of that high
Right,
school and the
right.
popular people.
Yeah.
And so they didn't know me from Adam. I was from 20 miles away, but I was up there skulking around looking at all the cool people.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
pretty amazing. Doing the twist.
Oh yeah, all those old songs. Yeah, I still listen on XM to that '50s channel all the time, and I can close my eyes and see little Jeannie dancing with Mike Bay. He danced with her a lot.
Oh, really?
He was a great
a
dancer.
slick dancer.
He was great. I was not at all. I was clumsy, you know, but she could dance with him all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's funny. Now, fishing. Did you fish as a kid?
Oh yeah. My father, as I said, who had a furniture store down here, was a workaholic, and I think a lot of people from the Depression were like that. He was afraid to have a good time. I asked one time, I said, "Do you have a hobby?" He said, "Yeah, working." I mean, just, you know, and I think he went fishing with me maybe once. Didn't care anything about football or anything like that. He just worked all the time. And so his mother, my granny, lived over at Redland, just south of Lufkin, and she started taking me fishing when I was 5 or 6, and she's the one who taught me how to fish.
Is this like with a cane pole?
Cane pole on the Angelina River before Sam Rayburn or anything. We'd go sit down there.
Before Charlie Wilson threw the guns in it and
that's
stuff.
Right, that's right.
So she taught you to fish.
Uh-huh.
But when
she
did
raised worms in her backyard. She had these, I guess they were 2x12s, a box, and she would pour her cooking grease and coffee grounds, and she had these worms about this long that were just like leather, you know, and you could catch 10 fish on one, cut the worm up, you know.
Yeah.
I had a friend who used to bite the worms and get his piece of worm off.
Yeah. You know, when I first came here, I remember, because I was fishing alone at first for whatever, I guess we hadn't met then, but I fished until it was midnight one night. I did a lot of fishing. I didn't do much catching, you know. But
there's just something about being away from the world, you know.
It was really good. It wasn't on a boat or anything. I was just bank fishing down
I remember
off.
when where the recliner used to sit on the bank.
Yeah. That's me. That was me. And Shirley Creek in that area back when it had water in it. And, you know, but it was just funny. Like I fished until midnight that night, and I was using stink bait on my fingers and stuff. And I thought, and I was new here, so I thought, you know what? Shreveport's just 59 miles away. So I went over there and I sat down at a blackjack table. I was real saved at that moment, let me tell you. And so it's midnight. I'm sitting at a blackjack table with people, and people are like,
what is
golly,
that? What is that?
Where have you been, son? And I'm like, just Nacogdoches, you know. But they're like, you need to go wash your hands.
Yeah.
And even that's not going to work.
I know it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, then we kind of, I don't know how this happened, but you started inviting me fishing, and I actually caught fish when I was with you.
Yeah. That same old tree out there that I bet I've caught 10,000 catfish, and you can move 10 feet either side and not even get a bite.
It's so weird too, because you know there was always this argument about like, this is my spot right here.
Oh yeah.
You know, and and then you could be over there and not catch anything.
On the same
How
boat.
is that possible?
On the same boat, yeah.
Tell me about a honey hole. What is a honey? This is maybe privileged information, but I'm not sure. I mean, old timers will know, but I'm not sure people really know what's in a honey. Why do they call it a honey hole?
It's just a special place where you always seem to catch fish. Now to be honest, we always kept that spot baited with just range cubes. I mean, of course, we didn't go every day.
You didn't put dead chickens and all that other stuff?
I've done that before, yeah. Dead chickens, all kind of stuff in there. But
That's what I'm fishing for right now is what's in the honey hole. Because it's scary. You know, I've seen fish with big old red lips, and I'm like, what's that about? And they're like, well, there's barrels down there. And
well, let me tell you, you remember my friend Cecil Hopkins.
Yeah,
who passed away.
absolutely.
He was my fishing buddy. And he and I used to stop in Woden on our way to Shirley Creek, and there was a chicken farmer down there who had 6 or 8 big chicken houses, and he would leave us his dead chickens. He'd put them in the freezer.
That's sweet.
Yeah, and then we'd pick them up and put them in a 5-gallon bucket and drill holes in the side and put the top back, put some weight in there and sink it, tie it to that same tree out there. And we'd leave it, and then they would get rank, you know, but the more rank they got, the more fish you caught. The catfish love that. But when we would start pulling the fish out, their lips would be bloody. And it was from trying to get into that bucket. The holes were, you know, about that big.
Yeah.
And you're going to think I'm lying, but after after maybe a week, you could pull that bucket up and there would be nothing but bones in it. They had
Oh, well,
managed to
they'd
get all the meat
sucked
out.
it dry,
The meat
huh?
out. Yes. And
Well, that was a mystery to me. I'd never seen
that's what that
lipstick
is.
on a fish before.
Either
but-
that or a barrel that somebody's dropped in there with, that. So some of them dropped 50-gallon barrels of that rotten cheese bait in there.
Wow. And they'd put like Christmas trees down there.
Yeah,
for
that's for
structure.
crappie usually. Yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah.
I went to a place one time in Florida and took my kids too, by the way. It was called Gatorland, and it was a giant concrete alligator mouth that you walk through to get to Gatorland or whatever it was called. And you went out there, and then you went along this walkway out over the water, and like for snacks, they sold you bad chickens,
Chicken parts.
which you could hold out or throw. I mean, I was like, this is the craziest thing ever, but we thought it was kind of fun at the time,
I bet they don't do that anymore.
I bet they closed that down. I imagine that cement's all chipped away now.
Where were you talking about? Where they were raffling a gun somewhere?
Milford's barbershop.
My favorite Nacogdoches gun story is, like I said, Dad had the furniture store down there, and 2 doors down there was a place called Crossland's Gun Shop, and it was a pawn shop and gun. He had new guns in there. And so I started looking at this. It was a 9-shot 22 revolver, and I was about maybe 12 or 13. And I would go down there every day and look at it. And finally, Mr. Crossland said, "You want that gun, don't you, Dave?" And it was $35, which was a lot back then. And I said, "Well, I don't have the money to get it." He said, "Well, we'll do it on what we call put it on layaway. You can come pay." He said, "I know you work for your dad. You can come pay $2 or $3 a week, and then when you get paid for it, you can have it." So the big day came. I took the rest of the money down there. It was brand new. And I said, I need to get it. You remember we called it a scalbert instead of a
Scabbard.
I need
Yeah,
a scabbard
scabbard.
instead of a holster.
Yeah.
And he had these new ones. I said, "Well, I don't have the money to get one of those." He said, "Well," he said, "there's a box over there with some used ones. Just dig through there until you find one that'll fit it. You can have it free." And so I had enough. I bought a box of 22 shells, I think, for $1. And I loaded that pistol right there in that store and put it on my belt and walked up the street to Daddy's store wearing a pistol. Can you imagine? They'd call a SWAT team if they saw a kid doing it. Walked in the store, and Daddy was white shirt and tie guy, and he was riding up a sale, and I saw him do a double take. He said, "Boy, what are you doing with that gun?" I said, "Well, I want to use it to shoot armadillos out at Papa's." He said, "Well, that's fine, but you probably shouldn't wear it here in the store."
Oh my God. That's so funny.
Yeah, and then I had a cousin who was 10 years old. They lived in Pasadena, and they came up here one summer, and they were visiting, and he walked from Daddy's store down to Branch Patton Hardware Store, which is where that bookstore is across from Roma's on the corner of North Pecan.
Yeah.
That was a hardware store, and he bought a 20-gauge shotgun down there and walked back up.
10 years old.
Yes, walked back from Bill Patton, walked back up Main Street carrying it.
And the weird thing is nobody got shot.
No.
Nobody got hurt. Nobody ran scared.
At high school, they'd have some sort of a magazine sales drive, a fundraiser for what, I don't know. But anyway, if you sold enough magazines, you'd win a prize. And I remember 2 years in a row, kids winning a 22 rifle. They'd present it to them on stage. They would take it. Of course, it didn't have the bullets, but they would take it back to the classroom and lean it up in the corner and then take it on the school bus with them home.
Yeah.
Nobody, and then they had the rifle racks in the backs of the pickups and all that, and nobody thought a thing about it.
In my school, we had a carnival or a Halloween fest every year. Sorry. But they had what was called a cakewalk. Have you ever done that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I won a 22 or a 410. I think it was just 22 at 10 years old because the cakewalk stopped. It was like musical chairs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I slept with it that night. I didn't load it, but I mean, I won that and an electric skillet. I was pretty lucky back then.
You were. That's funny. That's funny.
And we just didn't think anything about it. And in my house, we had a gun, we had a rifle at every door.
Oh, sure.
We only had, we had 3 doors that went to the outside: front door, back door, and the side door, I guess. But we had a loaded gun leaning against the wall at every door, and we were just taught, like, don't touch that. Oh, yeah. And I mean, even as a toddler, a baby, you just knew that you didn't touch the gun because you're going to die. Mm-hmm. And it was always kind of funny because, like, there'd be a skunk or something out, going after the chickens or whatever at night, and the dogs would start barking. And, we went to bed early. So here's my dad in his underwear and his wife beater T-shirt and his boots out in the yard with a gun shooting at a skunk, And, I mean, it was just crazy what you used to do.
Isn't that a great memory?
Oh, it is a great memory, Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of stuff really can take you back.
Do you remember? I was just thinking about some of the characters I've worked with. One of them. Do you remember Justin Wilson?
Yeah,
the Cajun humorist,
yeah,
and had the cooking show on PBS. Well, I produced his albums for 5 or 6 years back in the '70s. And South Louisiana, as you know, is a completely different world. Mm-hmm. And I had been working down there. He lived at Denham Springs, right outside Baton Rouge, and I'd been working down there for about a week. And I was producing some shows for Doug Kershaw and another Cajun band, and I had a lot of money in the car. Back then, it was about $10,000 in cash, and this was before,
that's a lot of money to be in just running around.
Yeah, but this was before the days of dope and all that stuff, and I was concerned that if I got stopped by the police over there, they'd think I had robbed somebody or something. So I
would too.
I was telling Justin about it that one morning. He said, "Oh, we can remedy that, boy." So we get in his car, and he had a Cadillac. Do you remember the red light, flashing lights you could buy? You could plug into your cigarette lighter. It had a magnet or a suction cup on it, and put it on. And he plugged that thing in and put it on top of his car, Cadillac. So we start going toward the parish seat, whatever, and 90 miles an hour, cars are pulling off so we could pull up to the sheriff's office. He takes me in. There was a big, fat Cajun sheriff with an EAUX name about a mile long. I could not understand a word he was saying. Yeah, something like that. So Justin explained the deal. He said, "This is my friend. He's got I had a pistol in the car, too. That was the main thing I was concerned about. And he's afraid if he gets stopped by the law over here that they're going to think he's robbed somebody." And that old sheriff looked at Justin. He says, "Justin, will you vouch for this boy?" He said, "Yeah, he's my record producer. I've known him for years. He's a good boy." And the sheriff reached in a drawer and pulled out a badge, and he said, "Mr. Stallings, would you raise your right hand?" So I raised my right hand. He said, "Do you swear to uphold the laws of the parish," or whatever it was, in the state of Louisiana, so help you God? And I said, "Yes, sir, I guess so." And he said, "You're one of my deputies now, and here's my business card." And he said, "If you got stopped by the lawman, you call me and tell him you're working undercover for me." And I said, "I'm a resident of Texas." He said, "That doesn't make any difference over here."
Wow. Oh, the good old days really, truly were good in a
really
lot of ways.
That was funny,
Once when I was in Detroit and I was kind of newly on the soap and stuff, but this cop recognized me, a street cop, just walking the beat. And I was in Detroit, which is not the safest city in the world. I mean, when they have a bank teller window for the hotel where you're staying, it's not a good sign. But anyway, this guy was like, "Oh man, you're on the General Hospital, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Take this card." And it was a get out of jail free card like Monopoly.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, "Anybody bothers you tonight, if you get arrested, you just hand them that card and you'll be fine." And I was like, I don't know if it was real or not, or whether he was testing me, but
who knows?
I carried that card for years. I was like, I'm going to whip that out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it never happened. But
one night, it's probably been 25 years ago, I had some friends in Nacogdoches, some lawyer friends over there. And, they have the big Christmas lighting thing over there. So they invited Gene and me over there. And so the party was upstairs in one of those buildings facing the river there on the main street, So you had to have an invitation to get in. So there was a Nacogdoches cop standing there, and I handed him the invitation, and he said, "Yeah, you can go in drinking a beer in uniform, wearing a gun." Yeah.
Well, it was a party night.
Oh yeah.
So.
And another favorite South Louisiana story. I'm getting off the beat here, but a few weeks later, I was back at Justin's house, and I produced a lot of his comedy shows around the country. He would really draw the first month or so that the Lufkin Civic Center was open. I don't even remember the year. I put Justin there. We recorded a live album that night. We had 2,000 people, sold it out. He was a big draw back then. But he had a little band. He called them the Wilsonville Sympathy Orchestra, and they were really horrible. One of them was a deputy sheriff, and one was a truck driver, and they really were not good. And he tried to sing, and he was not good, but he liked to sing. So anyway, one of the deputy was named Pat Carroll. I'll never forget it. So he came over, and my sister Deborah was with me, and some other person who worked for me. And we were talking about wanting to go down to the French Quarter. It's only about an hour and 15 minutes from Baton Rouge over there, something like that. And Pat was in a sheriff's car, in uniform, wearing a gun. He said, "Well, let's go." And I said, well, can you get off and go with us? He says, no, we'll go in this car. So we drive down there and park on Royal Street right over there. There's a police station there close to Brennan's over there. And parked on the street, they had barriers up and everything. He just left it sitting there. So we go to Pat O'Brien's, and he's drinking a Hurricane, and we made 2 or 3 bars over there. When we got back, his car was gone, and he started laughing. I said, man, what? Your car get towed? He said, oh, yeah. So he goes in with a drink in his hand in the police station. And this guy behind the desk says, Pat, we've told you cannot park your car on Royal Street. They sent and got his car, and we got in the car, and he said, what a great valet service.
Really? It's the police department. Oh, man.
Oh, man. I've known some doozies in the entertainment, and I know you have too, but characters.
Yeah. Tell them about what you did to me in Walmart that time.
Oh, about
You remember that?
the ladies who were looking at you, thinking
Yeah.
they recognized you. Oh yeah, they when you first came here, especially, I saw these 2 middle-aged looking ladies watching you over there, and I walked over there and I said, I know who you think that is. I said, that's a guy who's moved to Nacogdoches, who's telling everybody he used to be on General Hospital. That's not really him. And of course, Brad is so nice and sweet. Yeah, it really is.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I've had arguments with people that go, aren't you that guy from General Hospital? And I go, yeah. And they go, no, you're not. No, you're not. And I'm like, why did you come and ask me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
So what's the worst time, or you don't have to tell me terrible things, but, I mean, have you had, I tell my students when I'm teaching, like, they all think life is like this, that it's an arc. And I say, man, it's more like a roller coaster,
Oh, yeah.
you know? Have you had some roller coaster rides?
I've lost big time money on concerts and records that I produced and things like that. And, had distributors go out of business who were buying my records, because I produced records on a lot of Texas artists back in the 70s. And they'd go broke and leave you, owing you $100,000, that sort of thing, But I guess the strangest, I never had an artist not show up for a concert. I've had some show up and didn't draw a crowd, even though we'd promoted it correctly. I mean, it's just the luck of the draw,
Yeah.
But when the space shuttle crashed here, I had Ray Price booked for the Lufkin Civic Center. It seats, like I said, 2,000 people. That happened on a Saturday morning. Gene and I were watching TV the morning that happened.
I was going to ask you, where were you and what were you doing?
We were drinking coffee, sitting in the bed, watching CNN. And the whole house shook, and I thought, man, we're being bombed or something. I mean, a few minutes, they had just said the space shuttle will be landing in Florida in 13 minutes, and I guess it would be that fast over there from Dallas or wherever. And, of course, all the parts fell all over Nacogdoches. But anyway, that following Monday morning, I get a call from the Lufkin Civic Center saying, federal money was used to build this building, and the FBI and the recovery team have taken this over as their headquarters, so you can't have your concert here. And it was sold out.
Wow.
And I had no way of reaching a lot of these people who were coming from out of town. This was before the days of, automatic phone tickets and all that stuff. And a lot of them had, we'd mail them physical tickets and all that stuff. So I managed to call the old Lufkin High School auditorium over there on Denman Avenue. I think it's maybe an elementary school now, but it was the first time I ever brought Mel Tillis to East Texas. And I remembered it seated 1,478 people, which was still 522 people short of what I needed. So I called Ray, told him what happened. I said, you're going to have to do 2 shows that night, if you don't mind, because I can't get all the people in there. And I was able to rent that auditorium. Well, I had both my sons and a couple of their friends standing on each corner of that block by the Lufkin Civic Center, handing out maps to people to show them how to get over. Well, an FBI agent came out and thought they were some kind of protesters and ran them off, So we delayed this. I finally got everybody in, but that was the scariest, is a financial thing, I mean, if I had not been able to get that auditorium, I would have taken a huge hit that night, But yeah.
So when something like that happens, how do you get up the next day?
Do it again.
And do it again. I mean, did you ever have a time when you were like, well, I just think it's over,
Oh, yeah. I'll give you an example. The first time I ever booked Mel Tillis was in 1971. It was at that auditorium, 1,478 tickets. We sold out 2 shows that night. He was really hot back then. And I made, really more cash than I'd ever had in my life in my hands that night. 2 weeks later, I had him in Beaumont, which is, 20 times as big as the Golden Triangle, as they call it. It's 20 times more than that, bigger than Lufkin, Same Meltilla, same advertising, same everything. And I rented the city auditorium, the old municipal auditorium downtown. I was going to do 2 shows, afternoon and evening show, because I thought, man, we're going to hit the jackpot down here. Well, I didn't realize they were in the middle of major strikes down there at all those petroleum plants and everything like that. We had a total of 400 people show up for 2 shows in a 3,000-seat auditorium. And the curtains open. Of course, I had to pay Mel. His fee was $3,000 back then. And opened the curtains open. He looked at me and said, well, it looks like they stayed away in droves tonight. And he thought it was funny. I did not think it. It made me sick that night because I lost everything I made in Lufkin and some more that night, But then I kept doing it,
But I mean, you wake up the next morning and you just like shake it off.
Go get a real job. No, I shook it off. And I said, that was a fluke. And then later on, I had Ray Price and Willie Nelson, a bunch of people tell me that is the last place in the world you want to promote a concert because it just does not work.
So I was going to ask you, what made the difference?
I don't know. Like I said, they were on strike. A lot of the workers were, and so they didn't have the money to come, I guess. But it's still Ray and Willie had the idea to go down and rent the convention center on their own probably 30 years ago, and the two of them combined drew maybe 1,000 people. They both lost their shirts that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some towns are good and some are not.
Do you ever have any dealings with wrestlers?
Yes. I got the bright idea one night that I was going to promote a couple of wrestling shows. So I went and rented the Civic Center in Marshall and the one in Lufkin. I actually had some T-shirts made, the Von Erich's East Texas tour, and it had a Marshall right here in a straight line to Lufkin, Marshall, Lufkin, Von Erich.
The national tour.
So anyway, when I rented both those Civic Centers, usually you're required to have a couple of policemen, or one sometimes if the event's old people or something like that. But they said you're going to need, in both towns, they said you're going to need a minimum of 12 policemen. I said, why? They said, you're going to find out why. So sold out both, made a lot of money both those nights. And so the Von Erich show up in Marshall for the first night. Them and their opponents are all traveling in the same 2 vehicles.
See, that was one of my most heartbreaking moments is that they fought and then rode in the same car home.
Buddies. So I sat there after I met them, we went to get something to eat, and they were really nice guys. And one of them said, now, I'm going to win tonight because you won last night in Weatherford or wherever they were. And he said, well, okay. But the funny is there was one wrestler in that group called himself Skandar Akbar, and he was supposedly from Saudi
Middle
Arabia.
East, yeah.
I started listening to him talk. I said, man, he was a Mexican from Del Rio, but he would talk like But anyway, the first night in Marshall, of course, Kerry Von Erich was the big star and the big hero, and he was fighting Skandar Akbar, and so the referee, of course, conveniently turns his back for 3 minutes, looking the other way.
Yeah.
And so Skandar gets a chain out of his trunks and puts it around Kerry's neck like that. Well, one of Kerry's fans, a woman, was standing beside. She got up next to the ring and bit Skandar in the leg. He started cussing, and I mean, really bit him hard. She was like a dog, The cops had to pull her off. At the same time, 2 fights were going on among other fans out there. So they got those guys arrested and out of there, and another fight started, and I was out in the lobby. I was just kind of looking through the door. I didn't even want to be in the audience. It was so crazy. Cop brought one out there and set him down on a bench right where I was out in the lobby, and guy was handcuffed. He said, keep an eye on this guy. I'll be back in a minute. I said, what am I going to do? As soon as the cop goes back in the room, the guy just leaves, handcuffs and all, just didn't come back, So, and then in Lufkin, it was just about as bad, But I never did it again.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know how old you are, but what's left? What are you doing now? What's going to happen?
Well, I've been checking with the arbor up there for a room. No, I'm 78 and still going strong. I've just, of course, I've got that newspaper around the town, and I started it when I got off the road with the comedy tour just to have something to do.
Yeah, tell people about that around the town.
It's a free monthly newspaper here in Nacogdoches. We distribute 16,000 copies on the first of the month in Nacogdoches, Shelby, and Angelina counties in about 200 locations, and it's free online. and it's all positive news about people and businesses and events. And
So you don't do any bad stuff,
no
political stuff,
negative
all
news
that.
whatsoever. We're not a serious newspaper. Somebody asked the other day, said, "Have you ever won any awards for journalism?" I said, "Yes, we won the Pulitzer Prize in Shelby County for an article we wrote over there." But that's about
Pulitzer Prize.
but it's it's not a serious newspaper, but it's a fun read, and we sell a lot of advertising and do really well with it. We have it in the shelves and have big racks in Walmart here, and they empty out just almost immediately. But we do 16,000 copies of that paper on the first of the month, and generally by about the 10th or 11th, they're all gone, and we start again. So
Wow.
yeah, just started to have something to do. Of course, I born and raised here. I know everybody in town, so I think they felt sorry for me and bought ads to help me get started. And most of them have been with me. I think this is the 9th year, and it's still going strong.
People don't buy ads unless it works.
Oh yeah, I know.
You know
Yeah,
that.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that all there is? I mean,
No, I'm still producing a few concerts around.
who do you produce
Uh,
now?
John Conley, old guys, Ray and Mel and all of them are dead.
They're all younger than both of us. You know that,
Uh,
probably, or around the same
John
age.
Conley is a year older than and I do Sleep at the Wheel sometime. Ray Benson's 75 now. And then Gene Watson's 82 and actually singing better than ever,
Wow.
So, yeah. So mostly those three, they're pretty much a sure bet to draw. They're not going to draw like they did at one time, but they'll draw 500 or 600 people, and you can make money at that. But when I first started with Ray Price, we would draw 2,500, 3,000 people. But as the years progressed, he outlived his audience, and it got down to 500 or 600 people, and he was still wanting the same amount of money. And I finally had to just say, "Hey, I love you. You're one of my best friends, but I can't keep doing this."
Yeah.
But yeah.
One thing I really liked about Ray Price was he came out on stage the night I saw him, and the first thing he did was he told the sound guy, he said, "I want you to turn everything to 50% of whatever it is right now."
Mm-hmm.
And people for some reason, I think because musicians are mostly deaf.
That's right. They always blast you out
But
of the room.
they turn it, just crank it up, and constantly walk around at night turning it up again. And when because he had strings and all that stuff, when he started, I was like, this is what you guys have been missing, because instead of turning it up and making me feel all this stuff, turn it down and let me feel the stuff. And it was amazing. Yeah. It was so sweet.
His voice
and
just
beautiful.
Slightly on top of everything.
Yeah.
He played the Houston Rodeo when Ray lived to be almost 87. He died of pancreatic cancer and was working up to, he had it 2.5 years, which is probably a world record.
Yeah.
The last show he did was 6 weeks before he died, and his voice was actually better than it had ever been. It was an amazing thing to see. But they got booked to play the Reliant Stadium, where they have the rodeo in Houston, football stadium, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I had been to see the guys in the Alabama band were good friends of mine, Jeff Cook and Randy and all those guys. And I went to see them one night, and had I not, it was so loud, you could barely even get the melody of the song, and you could not understand one word they were singing at all, But I told Ray before he went, I said, "Listen, if you had to spend all day then," I said, "I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you don't. They won't be able to understand you." So they got down there and insisted that they got there 12 hours before the show and set up for the sound and started working and tweaking, and Ray got out there with them. And that was the first time I had ever been able to understand one word of anyone singing at the Houston Rodeo. I saw Hank Jr. and Bob Dylan, and it was just like a freight train coming at you,
Well,
he got 6 standing ovations that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's hard to sing in those places, I guess, because of the sound bouncing back and the rhythms and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Do you remember Hank Thompson?
Yeah.
Wild Side of Life was his first hit in 1951. Of course,
did he sing Roly Poly or something?
No,
or that's
Bob
Wills.
But he had Six-Pack.
Humpty Dumpty?
He had Humpty Dumpty Hard and all those
something.
nursery rhymes.
Yeah, yeah.
But he had Six-Pack to Go, and all that stuff. And anyway, he had a degree in electrical engineering from Princeton University, and he was a huge star in the 50s. And he after the war started the band. And he would play these places, big dance halls out on the West Coast. He was sort of Western swing too, like in the the vein of Bob Wills. And the sound would be so horrible that he was the first artist. He built his own sound system. Of course, they traveled in a bus and pulled a trailer. This was in the 50s.
Yeah.
And his sound was always perfect, just like Ray's, But he built his own system and would not use a house system anywhere at all,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's. This is a different kind of hat for you, but like you talked about Nacogdoches a minute ago, river running through it and boat parades and all that stuff. What can Nacogdoches do to make our town? I mean, it's a beautiful town anyway.
It is, yeah.
But is there other stuff that we could do to make it beautiful? What do you wish for in like downtown and stuff?
I have always wished that the old stone fort could be moved from where it is to the down. It originally was sitting on the corner where Commercial Bank is,
Right.
and in the early 1900s, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas decided to move it up to the I guess it was within the 20s because when the SFA opened, but they moved it up there. And of course, over the years, the traffic and it's so hard to get to it. I would bet you they don't have 5 people a day visit that thing, but it was a major part of Texas history. It'd be a great tourist attraction if it was somewhere downtown or close to downtown.
My understanding is it was where the Camino Real ended.
Yep.
At that time, because that's why that building sort of stuck out in the middle of the street. It was like, I didn't know that roads ended, but it was like, that's the end of the road, guys.
Line, yeah.
You came from San Antonio or Mexico, and now you're here.
They had a saloon in there where Sam Houston used to hang out.
I know.
Yeah. But I wish, I don't know if they could develop either. Probably this is the Lanana Creek on this end, right?
Right.
On the east end, if it could be developed, but of course there's no. I don't know if you could build buildings down in there or who owns the land or what, but
well, we do flood occasionally.
Yeah.
But
Nacogdoches is absolutely perfect.
And I think, is it Bonita Creek that runs along Festival Park back there?
Yes.
Because it seems like that we could develop trails and things like that there maybe. You got any final words? Not that you're dying, but, I'm not burying
Please forgive
you
me,
tonight.
Lord.
You want to pray together? Hold on.
Probably need to.
But,
no, I tell you, I've been all over, everywhere, both performing and producing events all my life, and Nacogdoches is still my favorite place in the world. I mean, I've been, as Hank Snow sang, I've been everywhere, and you have too, and I love it. It's of course it's 3 or 4 times as big as it was when I was a kid, but I still love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on this. It's a big favor to me to do that.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I appreciate it. It was made in Nacogdoches.
Yeah.
See you later.
I tried to be on my best behavior. So.